Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Trevor Hale retired to his dream lakeside cabin, he wanted peace, not war. But one bold HOA, led by a woman named Karen, crossed a line they never should have touched, bulldozing his land in the name of aesthetic standards. What followed was a battle they never saw coming. They say a man finds peace not in silence, but in the sound of the world on his own terms. That's exactly what I was looking for when I bought that stretch of lakefront property just outside of Bayfield. 4 acres of pine-shadowed land sloping gently into the glassy waters of Lake Briar, complete with a modest cedarwood cabin I had dreamed about for years. No HOA meetings, no community standards, no one telling me what color mailbox I could have. Just me, the loons, and the hum of the water brushing the dock. After 20 years as a civil and structural engineer, most of them spent buried in urban chaos and concrete, I retired at 41, tired but proud. And I wanted solitude, not surveillance. I'd done my homework. Before buying the land, I combed through zoning documents, plat maps, and title records. Bayfront Shores, a relatively new development on the opposite side of the cove, had a sprawling HOA with glossy brochures and a reputation for micromanagement. But my property, completely outside their jurisdiction. I made sure of that. I wasn't going to spend my retirement arguing about hedge height with some clipboard-wielding tyrant. I wanted independence, and I paid good money for it. The first few months on the property were everything I had hoped. I restored the old boathouse, built a wide wooden deck overlooking the lake where I could drink my morning coffee and watch the mist curl off the water, installed a solar-powered dock light, and cleaned up the overgrown trail that wound through the trees down to the shore. I even added a cozy gazebo near the edge of the slope, just a place to sit and breathe in the world. My neighbors were distant. The air smelled like pine and wet soil, and the quiet was so complete at night that I could hear the ripple of a single fish jumping out on the lake. Occasionally, I'd see residents from Bayfront Shores walking near the public access dock, dressed in their catalog-perfect weekend wear, tossing glances in my direction that made it clear they didn't think my property matched the aesthetic they were used to. That was especially true of one woman, Karen Lowry, mid-50s, always immaculately dressed, always frowning slightly like she smelled something off. I saw her once photographing my lot from the shoreline with a scowl. When I waved, she turned and left without a word. I thought nothing of it. There were always Karens in the world, and I dealt with enough of them in the corporate sphere to know how to ignore a storm that passed without striking. Besides, I had installed cameras around the property just in case. Not out of paranoia, but practicality. I liked knowing that while I was gone, which wasn't often, my land was still mine. That week, however, I had a quick trip to Chicago planned. A consultation gig. 3 days in and out. Before I left, I double-checked the locks, ran a test on the cameras, and stood for a moment on the dock, watching the water lap softly at the pilings. I had no idea that the next time I set foot there, the slope would be bare, the gazebo gone, and everything I'd built reduced to gravel and dust. The first thing I noticed when I pulled off the county road and onto my gravel drive was the silence. Not the peaceful kind I was used to, but the wrong kind. The kind that hangs heavy, like the air before a storm. My tires crunched slowly toward the house, but something felt off. I looked ahead, and my breath caught. Where there should have been the slope of my lakeside bluff, lush with native grasses and flanked by the rail-lined stairs I'd built myself, there was nothing but churned dirt and flat, raw earth. My deck, gone. The gazebo, gone. My retaining stones that curved like a smile along the shoreline, ripped up and scattered like someone had taken a rake to my soul. All of it obliterated. I slammed the truck into park and got out, boots crunching through the freshly bulldozed gravel like I was stepping onto a battlefield. The faint scent of diesel still clung to the air, and the scars of tread tracks were pressed deep into the soil. My knees felt weak. This couldn't be real. I staggered toward what used to be the gazebo. All that remained was a jagged circle in the dirt and a splintered stump where one of the support beams had stood. Right at the edge of the bluff, a small laminated sign fluttered on a wooden stake, half crooked in the dirt. Property modified under authority of Bayfront Shores HOA. Aesthetic violations removed in accordance with lakefront compliance standards. Further information available upon request. I stared at it like it was written in another language. Bayfront Shores. HOA? What the hell were they talking about? I ran to the house, fumbled to unlock the door, and stormed to my office. My cameras. I kept footage archived both on a hard drive and in the cloud just in case. I pulled up the feed from 2 mornings ago. The screen loaded. And there it was. A bulldozer rolling through my main gate like it was a suggestion. A team in neon vests with the Bayfront Shores logo stamped right on their backs. They moved quickly, with absurd confidence, working like they had every right in the world to be there. Within an hour, the deck was gone. Then the gazebo. Then they stripped the slope, pulling native plants by the root and tossing them into a dump trailer like weeds. 4 hours, start to finish. No hesitation, no supervision from the county, no permission from me. I sat in stunned silence, fists clenched. I hadn't received a letter, no email, no call. They had come onto private land, my land, and torn it apart like they were mowing a lawn. The worst part? There was no mistake. They knew exactly what they were doing. I didn't even wait until morning. I called the number listed on the HOA's website and demanded to speak with Karen Lowry. The receptionist tried to pass me off to someone else, a compliance specialist, or some equally useless title. But I insisted. Loudly. Finally, after a brief pause and a suspiciously cheerful 1 moment, the line clicked, and there she was. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice smooth and clipped, like she was already bored with me. "I assume this is about the improvements to your shoreline." I nearly crushed the phone in my hand. "Improvements? You bulldozed my damn property." A pause. Not long, just enough to suggest she was pretending to think about her answer. "Your slope had multiple violations of our shoreline aesthetic and environmental maintenance policies. It posed a visual imbalance to the bay. We've had multiple complaints over the past few months." "From who?" I snapped. "Birds? The fish?" She sighed, like she was dealing with a child. "We received feedback from residents across the cove. Your bluff was excessively terraced. The gazebo created a visual obstruction, and your dock didn't comply with the style guidelines." I nearly laughed, but the fury in my chest turned it into a bark. "I am not a member of your HOA. My property isn't even inside your jurisdiction." Karen didn't miss a beat. "That's debatable. As of last month, the HOA board approved a shoreline expansion of the association's boundary to include parcels that visibly affect the community's aesthetic. Your property meets that criterion." "You cannot just decide that," I growled. "You can't bulldoze private land based on visual criteria. That's not how law works. That's not how boundaries work. You're not a government." She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Mr. Hale, we understand this transition can be confusing, but you are more than welcome to bring your property into compliance and formally join the association. That would, of course, resolve any remaining conflicts." "You think I'd join after this? You destroyed structures I spent years building. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Her tone shifted, cooler now. Less performative. "We acted under the authority of the board. If you have an issue, you're free to pursue legal remedies. But the lake is a shared asset, and your property, frankly, was an eyesore." For a second, I couldn't speak. It wasn't just arrogance. It was certainty. This woman genuinely believed that a group of neighbors with titles and clipboards could vote their way into controlling someone else's land. I took a slow breath and forced my voice level. "You've made a serious mistake, Karen, a legal one. I hope your board enjoys their meetings because they're going to be attending a lot of them in court." "Oh," she said coolly. "We're not worried. We've done this before." She hung up before I could answer. By sunrise the next morning, I was already on the phone with my lawyer. Angela Patel wasn't just any attorney. She was the kind of property rights specialist who could quote zoning code faster than most people could recite their own address. We'd worked together once before when a previous neighbor tried to claim part of my side fence crossed onto his land. She shut it down in 3 days. This time, though, the stakes were 10 times higher, and I could hear the shift in her voice after I told her what had happened. "They brought a bulldozer onto your property without a permit," she repeated, "and they're claiming jurisdiction based on visual impact." "Visual aesthetic compliance," I said bitterly. Apparently, my gazebo offended their HOA gods. "I'll be at your place by noon," she replied. "Tell your cameras to be ready." When Angela arrived, she didn't waste time on pleasantries. We reviewed the footage again, this time documenting everything: timestamps, faces, equipment brands, license plates. Her assistant launched a drone to do a fresh aerial survey of the property, comparing it with the footage from a month ago. The before and after contrast was brutal. Where there had been a lush, shaded slope lined with timber and riverstone, now lay a flattened patch of dirt like a construction site abandoned mid-job. Angela's face grew darker with each pass of the footage. This isn't just trespassing. This is destruction of private property, vandalism, unauthorized land modification, civil and criminal exposure. She paused the video on a frame showing 3 men in Bayfront Shores vests, laughing as they dismantled my gazebo. And depending on what that structure was worth, we could be talking about felony charges. I built it myself, I said, but the materials alone cost me 10 grand, plus the deck, plus the dock. Her eyes narrowed. Let's get a full damage assessment, and then we go digging. What we uncovered over the next 72 hours was the kind of paper trail that turns petty HOA politics into a full-blown scandal. Angela filed a public records request with the county and received copies of every plat, jurisdictional document, and subdivision filing tied to Bayfront Shores. My parcel wasn't included, ever, not in the founding documents, not in any annexation. Not even in draft proposals, but hidden deep in the minutes from a recent emergency board meeting. We found the smoking gun, a single-page document dated 3 weeks prior to the destruction of my property, labeled as Resolution 22A, Shoreline Expansion Initiative. It claimed that the HOA had unanimously approved a boundary extension to include my lot and 2 others. Across the bay, the justification, community view preservation, and environmental conformity. The signatures of 5 board members were scribbled at the bottom, except one of those signatures belonged to a man who'd moved out of the state last year, and another belonged to a woman who was, according to her obituary, 6 feet under since January. Angela laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. They forged signatures. That's fraud, Trevor. Criminal. And if they coordinated the action based on that forged vote, that's a conspiracy. It got worse. One of Angela's contacts in the zoning office tipped her off to an internal complaint made by a Bayfront Shores resident, someone who was angry about the vote and had tried to report the HOA to the county compliance board. The complaint was buried, never followed up on. Then came the audio. I hadn't realized one of my cameras had picked up sound when Karen visited my property 2 months earlier. She hadn't stepped beyond the public access point, so I hadn't thought much of it, but Angela insisted we check the archived audio files just in case. And there it was, clear as glass. Karen's voice. This man's dock is a joke. If we let that stand, people will think anyone can buy lakefront and slap up whatever they want. We need to fix it before summer hits. We'll say it's a boundary clarification. Angela paused the file and turned to me. We're suing. And not just for damages. She began drafting the lawsuit that same night. The total claim, $3.5 million, property destruction, emotional distress, costs of restoration, legal fees, and punitive damages for fraud and malicious intent. By the time we finished, I didn't feel vindicated, not yet. But I did feel something else I hadn't felt since the day I came home to a flattened bluff. Purpose. I wasn't just going to defend what was mine. I was going to make damn sure no one ever tried this again. Courtroom 3B was packed. Not with media, not yet, but with neighbors, HOA members, and enough anxious whispers to make the air feel electric. The preliminary hearing had barely started, and already the judge looked like he regretted getting out of bed that morning. Judge Frederick Holloway, a no-nonsense man in his 60s with a deep voice and the kind of glare that could split wood, took his seat with a sigh and motioned for silence. I sat beside Angela at the plaintiff's table, fingers steepled, watching Karen Lowry across the aisle like a hawk eyeing a mouse. She wore a pearl-white blazer tailored to the point of discomfort and kept glancing at the clock on the wall like she had brunch reservations. Angela stood first. Your Honor, she began, firm and measured. We are here today because my client's property was unlawfully entered, structurally destroyed, and aesthetically obliterated, all under the false authority of a homeowners association that had neither jurisdiction nor legal standing over the land in question. The defense attorney, a slick younger man named Bryce Lorman, objected immediately. We maintain that the HOA acted under its right to enforce environmental and community standards as authorized by its recently expanded charter. Objection noted, Holloway said, raising a hand. Now sit. I want evidence before I get arguments. And evidence we had. Angela wasted no time. She rolled out the footage, my cameras capturing the bulldozer ripping through my slope, Men in neon vests laughing as they tore down the gazebo, Karen herself giving instructions from the edge of the property. Then the drone footage, before and after, stark enough to make the courtroom collectively suck in a breath. The judge leaned forward. "And you're saying the HOA authorized this?" "That's what they claim," Angela replied smoothly. "But this," she held up the document labeled Resolution 22A, "is what they based it on. We projected it on the screen, 5 signatures. And next to each, Angela laid out sworn affidavits. One from the man who had moved to Oregon last year, another from the daughter of the deceased board member, and 2 more from current residents who swore they never attended any such meeting. Then came the recording. Karen's voice filled the courtroom, clear and cutting. "If we let that stand, people will think anyone can buy lakefront and slap up whatever they want. We need to fix it before summer hits. We'll say it's a boundary clarification." Karen visibly flinched. Bryce tried to object, citing incomplete context, but the judge waved him off. "Mrs. Lowry," he said, turning toward her directly, "were you aware that the signatures on this resolution were falsified?" Karen straightened her back. I acted on the information provided by the board. I trusted our administrative process." Angela stood again. "Did you, or did you not, personally instruct a demolition crew to begin work on my client's land?" Karen hesitated. "I coordinated with the landscape compliance team, yes." "So you directed them to destroy structures on land that you had not verified was within your jurisdiction?" "I believed the land was part of the HOA's expansion plan." Angela dropped the final document onto the bench. A letter from the county registrar rejecting any submitted boundary changes from Bayfront Shores due to procedural errors, dated 2 days before the destruction. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Holloway leaned back slowly, as if physically restraining his own temper. "So to summarize," he said, voice low and dangerous, "the Bayfront Shores HOA forged a vote, expanded its boundary illegally, destroyed private property without consent, and attempted to cover it under the pretense of community standards." Angela nodded. "That is correct, Your Honor." "And Mrs. Lowry, as president, oversaw all of it?" Karen didn't answer. Her face had turned pale. The judge looked at the clerk. "Set a trial date and contact the district attorney. I suspect we'll be needing them." By the time the trial date was officially scheduled, Bayfront Shores HOA was already cracking at the seams. Residents began to distance themselves from Karen in droves. Some quietly resigned from the board. Others sent apologies, handwritten even, slipped under my front gate like peace offerings. But I wasn't looking for apologies. I wanted my land back the way it was. Or better, restoring the slope became a mission, not just to rebuild, but to reclaim. I hired a trusted landscaping crew I'd worked with during my years in engineering, guys who knew how to move earth with respect, not like the careless vandals Karen sent. We started by regrading the slope carefully, using drone footage and survey maps to match the original contour. I sourced stone from a quarry upstate, rough-hewn and weathered just the way I liked it. Every layer we laid down felt like setting a bone back in place. Then came the deck. I rebuilt it from scratch, this time wider, stronger, with stainless steel supports sunk deep into the bedrock beneath. The gazebo returned too, but this one was no simple lakefront structure. This was Bez 2 HOA, full cedar construction with reinforced beams, bronze fixtures, and a retractable canvas shade system. It was elegant, but solid, a little architectural middle finger to the wreckage they'd left behind. As we worked, I noticed something interesting. Neighbors from Bayfront Shores started passing by. Slowly at first, a man walking his dog, a woman out for a jog. They didn't look angry anymore, they looked curious. Some even paused to watch the work in silence. Others offered quiet nods, and one even came over with 2 beers and said, "I always thought that view was better from your side anyway." I didn't say much in return. I was busy, focused, driven. And it helped. The work gave me back control piece by piece, plank by plank. And while the crew hammered and hauled, I handled the finer details. I upgraded my security system, installed floodlights and motion sensors along the perimeter, and replaced every camera with 4K wide angles synced to both my phone and an encrypted server. A friend of mine who specialized in private surveillance helped me rig up an alert system with geofencing. If anything crossed that bluff again without authorization, I'd know before they got 5 steps in. And then there was the sign. I had it carved out of stone by a local artisan. Rough granite, 20 inches high, set just beside the new gravel turn-in at the entrance. Bold serif lettering, deeply etched, painted with weatherproof sealant in black. This is not HOA land. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Bulldozers will be stopped, next time with a shotgun. Below that, in a quieter script, Karen destroyed a slope and ruined her life. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about setting boundaries, literal and metaphorical, that no one would ever dare cross again. By the end of the summer, my bluff didn't just look like it had been restored. It looked like it had always been meant to be exactly as it was. Stronger, sharper, unbothered, I'd turned a scar into a fortress, and it was beautiful. The trial didn't last long. Once the evidence came out, the forged documents, the unauthorized demolition, the audio of Karen spelling out her vendetta like she was managing a country club instead of abusing actual property law, the outcome was inevitable. The jury awarded me the full $3.5 million every dollar, no hesitation. The room was dead silent when the verdict was read, save for Karen's shallow, uneven breathing. The judge didn't mince words in the final statement. He called her actions a deliberate campaign of aesthetic authoritarianism and said what she had done struck at the very foundation of private property rights. He was furious, and in the end, he wasn't alone. The DA's office filed charges the same afternoon: forgery, criminal trespass, destruction of private property, conspiracy to defraud. It didn't matter how many pearl necklaces she wore or how many garden club photos she'd posed for. Karen Lowry was now a convicted felon. 1 year in county jail, no parole, and, most satisfying of all, a lifetime ban from holding any administrative position in any HOA, civic board, or local development authority ever again. As for Bayfront Shores HOA, they didn't survive the fallout. Once the lawsuit hit the press, the residents started resigning en masse. Lenders began pulling funding from their community projects. The board dissolved within a month, and by the end of the year, the HOA was disbanded completely. In its place, a voluntary neighborhood committee was formed, one that had no binding authority, just a few friendly folks who cared about potholes and holiday lights. I had no desire to join, of course, but I didn't mind waving to them from my dock now and then. Karen's house went up for sale a few weeks after the sentencing. It sat on the market for months, unsold. Word gets around in small lake towns. Eventually, she offloaded it to an out-of-state buyer at a loss. The last time I saw her, she was dragging 2 suitcases to the back seat of a beat-up sedan, sunglasses covering half her face, lips thin and pressed like she was holding in a scream. No neighbors came to say goodbye. No one watched her leave. She just vanished. I'm not proud of what she lost, but I'm damn proud of what I kept. These days, I spend my mornings on the rebuilt bluff, sipping coffee under the cedar rafters of the new gazebo, the wind carrying the scent of pine and lake water through the screen panels. Some weekends, friends from out of town visit and sit with me under the wide shade of the deck. We laugh, we grill. Sometimes we talk about the lawsuit, and I tell the story, not to gloat, but as a reminder of what happens when you let people trample your line in the sand. And every now and then, someone asks about the stone marker by the entrance, that bold slab of granite with the shotgun line, and Karen's name etched into memory. They ask if it's a joke. I just smile. It's not a joke. It's a monument.